Hello, and welcome to our Holy Week devotional for Saturday. The Bible really doesn't tell us a lot about what happened on Saturday during Holy Week. It doesn't give a lot of perspective on some of the things that happened. There's only one brief scripture that really says anything at all, and I'd like to read that to you right now. And this is from Matthew 27:62. The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first. Take a guard, Pilate answered. Go make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went, and they made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. The chief priests and the Pharisees called Jesus a deceiver. And during his trial and during his time on the cross, they had made a mockery of him, calling him the king of the Jews, and they had taunted him and teased him. If you are really God's son, get yourself off that cross. Save yourself. And it really was a joke to them that they were doing this to Jesus. And they didn't want Jesus making them the joke. They wanted to make sure that he was going to be dead and he was going to stay dead, and that nobody was going to be able to deceive them the way they had proclaimed that he had deceived before. Well, now we know that the Roman guards were very inadequate in what they were trying to do in preventing the resurrection. That just didn't happen. And the women who returned to the tomb on Sunday found the tomb empty. Jesus had risen, just as he said he would. And with this being said, I kind of let my imagination go, and I started thinking of scenarios that might have happened while people were waiting to see if what Jesus had said he would do, he was able to do. And I thought of three different people. I thought of Mary, who was there at the cross, and I thought of Peter, who wasn't there at the cross, and I thought of John, who was there at the cross. And the first person I want to talk about is Mary. Mary, the mother of Jesus. And I see Mary there at the house. I see her laying in her bed. And I see her thinking about the things that had happened, the things she had seen as she had gone through this with Jesus. She had seen them whip him. She had seen them torture him. She had seen him weak as he tried to carry his cross. And she had seen them pull Simon, the Ethiopian Jew, out of the crowd. And she had seen him try to help Jesus carry this cross because her son was so weak. And as these pictures played over and over and over in her mind, the pain became fresh and new all over again to Mary. I see her laying there, and I see her body just racked with pain as she pictures these things happening to her son, her precious child, who had been tortured so. And she couldn't do anything. She couldn't help him. She couldn't rescue him. She couldn't take any of that from him. The job that she'd been given as mother to nurture him, she could no longer do. Jesus, her son, now was gone. And as she lays there, the nausea just rolls through her body again. And as she sees these things playing through her mind, she just curls up into a fetal position. And she remembers Jesus said he would rise. He would come back from the dead. And she remembered seeing him do this with other people. But when he did this for other people, he had the power. And he was alive. He had life in himself. And now that he was dead, would he still have that power? Now that he was lifeless, could he produce life? And she wondered. And the tears would start all over again. Could Jesus come back too? She wants to believe. She tries to believe. But can he do it? And then I see Peter. Peter is also in bed. The room is dark, and he tosses and turns. He had denied Jesus. Just the day before, he had denied Jesus. Jesus had predicted he would do this. And he said, "Oh, no, not me. I would never deny you." And yet here he is, the next day, going through these pictures in his mind of that very act. He had denied Jesus. How could he let down the only person in his life who had never let him down? And yet he had denied Christ. Why? And now here Jesus was dead. Was it his fault? Could he have done something differently? Maybe if he'd stood up to the people there at the fire, maybe he could have stopped them taking Jesus. Maybe Jesus didn't have to die. But he had denied him. He'd let him down. And he thrashes again in the bed. His head thrashes to the left, to the right. He tries to shake these images out of his head. But instead of getting rid of the images, he sees in his head the picture of the servant girl there by the fire. And she says, "This man also was with him." And immediately Peter said, "Woman, I do not know him." And Peter remembers again that he had denied Jesus. And he thrashes to the right. And he tries to get comfortable, but he can't. He tries to get rid of these pictures, but he can't. And the guilt and the confusion just course through him. And he sees this nondescript figure of someone else who's around the fire. And he hears the voices again as this person accuses him of being there with Jesus. And Peter, once again, says, "Man, I am not." Oh. The darkness of the night exacerbates the angst that Peter is feeling. And he screams into the night, "Oh God, how could I have done that to you?" And he tries to settle in. And he tries to erase the images in his mind. But he can't. And the voices in his head begin again. And this time, he hears, "Certainly, this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean." And the next voice he hears is his own. "Man, I do not know what you're talking about." And he clutches his head. And he tries so hard to forget. But just like yesterday, the rooster crows. And just like yesterday, he sees Jesus. And he can see him walk past the fire. And Jesus just turns his head and looks at Peter. And as the cock crowed, Peter realized that night that he had just done what Jesus said he would do. And he had denied him 3 times. And just like yesterday, Peter wept bitterly. And then Peter remembers that someone had said that when Jesus was on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them." Could he be forgiven? Could he be forgiven for denying Jesus? Could he be forgiven? And he wants to believe. Does he dare believe? Could this be true? And then I see the picture fade to John. I don't see John in his bedroom. I see John out in a garden around his house. And I see him propped up against a rock. And I see him watching the night sky. And it's beginning to lighten. He's been out there all night long. He's got a lot to process. He's got a lot to think about. Jesus has bestowed a huge honor on him. Huge. A responsibility. Like no other responsibility he's ever had. He's overwhelmed. And he doesn't know what to do. Mary, the very mother of Jesus, was now his responsibility. That's a lot to live up to. I see John raking his fingers through his hair as he tries to come to terms with this. And I think he might be saying to himself, I don't know if I can do this. How could I possibly live up to what Jesus has asked me to do? I need to make sure that I have everything that she will ever need. And I can see him running through the different scenarios in his mind as he's trying to process just what that means for what he's going to have to do for Mary, the mother of Jesus. And then I see him close his eyes as he remembers being there at the cross, one of the few of the disciples who were there. And he hears Jesus as he says, "Dear woman, here is your son." And he looks at Jesus and he sees that Jesus and Mary are looking at him. And then Jesus addresses him and says, "Here is your mother." Wow. Could he live up to the job that Jesus had given him? He wanted to believe. He tried to believe. Did he dare believe that he could do what Jesus had asked him to do? And then the horrors of the day before go through his mind again. And he realizes that Jesus is dead. And he has no choice. He has to believe that he can do this job that Jesus has given him. And as he realizes his best friend, the man that he loved like no other, was dead, Jesus was gone. John wept. And as he's there in the garden crying, the sun comes up. And all of a sudden, it's Sunday. Mary gets up out of her bed and she prepares to start her day. And she knows that Mary Magdalene and Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Salome are all going to be going to the tomb that day to anoint Jesus, to anoint his body for burial. And she wonders, what will they find? Will the body be there? Will all their hopes be dashed? Or will they find that Jesus is alive, just like he promised? And I see her standing a little taller as she determines, well, I will never know until I know. So it's time to find out. It's time to test this faith. It's time for the moment of truth. And I see Mary standing there in her room at John's house. And at the same time, Peter is standing in his room there at his house. And John is standing in the garden. And the women are approaching the tomb. And they find that it is empty. And as the realization comes to all of them that Jesus will indeed do what he says he will do, they stand and simultaneously say, "I believe."